Okay, we are recording. Ed, how you doing?
Uh, Embarrassingly well, Stu. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm okay. We've got the first bit of sunshine in about 9 months in the UK. The last couple of days, so everybody's wearing shorts and t-shirts and just and it's just lifted spirits massively. It's lovely. It's glorious over here at the moment.
Yeah, it's same things happening here. I'm a couple hours northeast of Toronto, and the weather's just started to get hot, and the that brings on mosquito and black fly season here. So everybody does get excited and get out the tank tops and short shorts, but then the mosquitoes eat you alive.
So before we sort of look forward, let's just talk about the last sort of 13, 14 months. How have you found it, Ed, like personally, and how have you found it creatively?
Well, um, personally, it was it kind of ran the gamut of the emotions. I was really happy, and I felt really lucky to have the time with my family. Um, I'm speaking to you from a remote cottage in the woods on a whole bunch of land. My kids have been up here with me the whole time. The family aspect of it, the togetherness was incredible, but I was also carrying around this existential dread of getting sick and becoming debilitated. I didn't think like, oh, if I get COVID, I'm probably gonna die. What I did feel like was like, what if I get sick and I can't sing anymore? What
Yeah.
if this affects my lung capacity? And it wasn't until I got the first dose of the vaccine back in early April that I really felt a weight that I had no idea I was carrying lift off my shoulders. And all of a sudden, I realized the stress I've been managing for a year at that point, more than a year. And I'm lucky now to actually have my second dose. And I just, I said to a friend, I feel like I'm finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And he said, careful, that may be the train. But yeah, and in terms of creatively, it's actually been really cool. I learned to use Pro Tools, which in 3 years of being a professional musician, I had never really adopted the technology. So I learned Pro Tools. I learned to edit in Adobe Premiere. So I became really self sufficient. And that allowed me to do a lot of really fun, creative things up here. So though I'm remote, I have all the gear I need for a studio here. I've got moving cameras, and I can edit together a solo performance, and it actually looks real.
I think that's one of the really exciting things through speaking to so many, not just musicians, but producers and actors and all manner of sort of creative people over this last sort of couple of years, and more so the last sort of 14 months, just seeing whether it be putting together a live stream show or just learning something like Pro Tools. I think when musicians are starved of the stuff that they're generally accustomed to, it brings out that kind of punk ethic of like, right, what have I got? What can I do with it? And I love that. I think that is what brings out exciting new stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and certainly for the first couple of months, I didn't even have a tripod here. So
Yeah.
setting my phone like leaned on a stack of books on a step ladder, and I didn't have any pro audio gear, so I was just like performing into a laptop microphone. And I didn't really care. And as things wound on though, I thought, okay, well, this is a new reality. I need to adapt to this and
Yeah.
adopt the technology that I need to make this a little more pro. Um, but I didn't at first. I was like, I don't care. I just want to perform. It can be guerrilla style. It can be low res. Nobody cares. People are at home. They're locked down. They just want to be entertained. And so the first uh, dozen live streams I did were very low res.
Okay, well let's start the playlist. And for track one, Ed, I'm going to ask you to tell me, please, the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro.
I had to go with Rush, The Spirit of Radio. It's one of the greatest rock and roll intros of all time. It is an incredibly deceptively difficult guitar part to play. And then the shots that Geddy and Neil are playing on top of that weird guitar part, ba 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 ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-dum. It's very orchestral, and it's one of those things you can listen to it and you know where all those shots are. It's not till you're in a high school band and you try to play that song that you realize the madness that is going on in it,
Yeah.
and it just carries you through. It's such a that's the word I would just use to describe it. It's orchestral. It is so magnificent, and it's almost like that, the curtains coming up in an incredible performance space, and the song really starts when the verse pattern begins, but the intro of Spirit of the Radio is a journey all to itself.
Well, I saw that Getty inducted you into the Music Hall of Fame, and so tell me a little bit about how important a band Rush were for you.
um, well, my high school band, I think, played 27 Rush songs. Did all kinds of other stuff. We did the Police, we did Peter Gabriel, we did Talking Heads, but Rush was like, that's the reason I wanted to be in a band. It's the first concert I ever saw in an arena. Their posters were on my wall. Um, it's it's why I learned my instrument. It's why I became good on guitar, was to play all those weird songs. And um, Rush is like a band that teaches you how to be a band, because they're three guys doing very different things that work well together, and it really teaches you about the interaction of the instruments. Um, it's impossible to overstate the influence those guys had on me. And I got to meet them fairly early in our career at a big awards show up in Canada, and they were so cool. They were just so normal and appreciative and welcoming. And in about '92, we sold out 4 nights at Massey Hall, which is kind of Toronto's Royal Albert Hall. It's a prestigious performance venue in the city. And when Rush recorded All the World's a Stage back there in 75 or so, they sold out 3 nights at Massey Hall to record that live record. We sold out 4 nights. And the guy sent us a bottle of champagne and said, like, dudes, it was only supposed to be 3 nights. What are you trying to pull here? And, you know, they're awesome. They're musical surrogate fathers for me.
I wasn't massively aware of like the full sort of catalogue of Rush's work, and I've got several friends that are obsessive fans of Rush, and so I've heard quite a lot, and it was only when I set a bit of time aside and I watched the documentary, the Rush film,
Beyond the
and
light.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, what comes across more than anything is they just seem like the nicest people on the planet.
Yeah. They really are. They're lovely, lovely guys. Um, and yeah, it's funny. There are very few casual Rush fans. You
Mm.
either don't like the band or you love the band. And there comes a point for every musician where you know it's the reason you love your instrument and you want to perform, and then you move on to other things. Everybody goes through that, but Rush for me were like the reason I wanted to do this. And to get to interact with those guys and have them exceed every possible expectation of what uh, a collaboration with your heroes could be, and the way they normalize that experience. And I remember saying to Geddy Lee, like, I can't believe you cut short your vacation and you flew here to induct us into the Hall of Fame. Like, I'm so moved. And he was like, dude, you're a brother. You do this for brothers. And
Oh man, that cool.
he's amazing.
Well, I'm going to ask you for track two. I'm going to take you back a little bit now. And I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me the first song you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please.
This is such a corny answer, but it's 100% true. It was Kenny Rogers, "The Coward of the County,"
Okay.
which is a country and western story song about and it's all laid out in the lyrics. It's about a guy who's sort of the town weakling, and he has grown up with the advice of his father to uh, it don't mean you're weak if you turn the other cheek, and I hope you're old enough to understand you don't have to fight to be a man. So his dad is trying to like coddle him and tell him that just because everyone calls him a coward, like he doesn't have to fight to prove himself. And then in this song story, he returns back to the farm to find his true love is being assaulted by the shitheads of the town, the bad dudes, and he steps in and gets his ass kicked. But he stands up for this woman, and the amazing part of the song is he then goes to his father and says, "I hope you understand. Like, sometimes you have to fight when you're a man." It's like, it's such a beautiful little short story. It's got tragedy and incredible sadness in it. And I remember, like, what would I have been, 8 when that song came out? 9 years old? And I'm like, boy, I guess if someone's ever trying to take advantage of the girl on the farm, I'm going to have to step in. you know, I had 0 touchstones for this song, and yet it was such a complete story. It entirely moved me.
If you had to pinpoint what that emotion was, what do you think it was?
It was probably like responsibility. It was what would the emotion have been? It encompasses a lot of things. It's about fear. It's about shame. It's about defiance. Like it's a pretty incredible song for a little 3-minute country song.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess it made me sympathize with a character who was uh, overpowered and yet tried to do the right thing, and then had to face uh, family pressure and maybe even family shame for fighting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of a beautiful little song.
I mean, I presume you was at home listening to that. So I'm going to ask you, was there always music on growing up at home?
Always, and in fact, it was early country music. My parents, my dad played guitar. My mom and dad sang harmony vocals, and it was always old school country songs from Willie Nelson to George Jones. Like Kenny Rogers was a modern country artist
Mm.
when that record came out, and I grew up on much older 50s and 60s country music. That's the reason I wanted to start playing guitar.
Well, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to stay in the formative years for the next track, Ed. I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me a song that reminds you of your time at school.
Um, high school was what opened me up to all sorts of other influences. Um, and Peter Gabriel was a huge change for me. I feel like I went from the complicated prog rock of Rush to this poetic art rock that Peter Gabriel encapsulated for me. And particularly the song San Jacinto, which is such, it's almost like an impressionist painting. It's the imagery in it is really stark and beautiful, and you have a sense of what's going on in the song, but it's not really spelled out. It's it's like snapshots of this struggle. Um, and I initially came to this song, I think, through the Birdie soundtrack, which
Right.
Matthew Modine film. And a lot of the stuff that subsequently ended up on the following Peter Gabriel records started as instrumental tracks for the score of Birdie. And I loved the composition that became San Jacinto. It was one of those things that it captured me right away. Like, I don't even know what instruments those are. Like, is that a is that a keyboard sound? Is that mallet percussion? Is it a mix of the two? I don't know what time signature this is in. Like, everything about that song was a new frontier for me. And when you think about those lines, red paint, eagle feathers, coyote calling, it has begun. A rattle in the old man's sack says, look at mountain top and keep climbing up. It's like, it's so suggestive and so evocative, but I don't really know what's happening. I feel like I'm dropped into a sweltering struggle, and I don't know what's happening.
Had you? I mean, you mentioned the kind of the introduction to Rush, and obviously the prog elements of that. Did you go to Gabriel first, or was you aware of the kind of more prog earlier stuff from Genesis with Gabriel?
No, I went to Gabriel first. I was actually far down the road with Peter Gabriel before I was like, oh, that dude was in Genesis? I had no idea. I think the first record I got into in a big way was probably Plays Live. And then I went backwards and got into all those earlier records. And then, really, much later, found out the history of Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
Probably via Salisbury Hill, listening to, which is another track with an incredible intro. Listening to Salisbury Hill, loved the story and did a little reading and found out, oh, this is an autobiography, this song. And wait a minute, he left one of the biggest bands in the world to become one of the biggest solo artists in the world. Like, pretty incredible.
Absolutely. Have you? I mean, when you've been in the UK, have you ever ventured to Bath? Have you ever been to Salisbury Hill, or you went there? Cool. It's all right, isn't it?
Yeah. We Bath. I think it's called the Mole Club.
That's it.
The Mole Club holds the record for the filthiest dressing room in the history of Barenaked ladies. It's quite a place. I'll never forget that.
It's a bizarre little place. You're on this little one way. It's almost like in the side of like a kind of bridge. It's really weird. And you go into this kind of dark little dingy venue. It's also the place where we literally played to two men and a dog when my band was playing way back in the mid-90s. But we just wanted to go there so we could then just go and climb Salisbury Hill, sing it all the way to the top, and then just get a photograph at the top. We was more bothered about that than the gig.
Yeah, well, two men and a dog is not a bad turn. Species covered. Only one gender, potentially two, depending on the dog. But
well, Whilst before we move on, just talking about school a little bit. How did you find school? Was it something you enjoyed?
It was actually. I was quite a fast learner. I was terrible at doing homework, um, but my teachers all really liked me, and I was a bright and polite kid, and I was in a really good school with lots of resources, and I was in this. It was called the Gifted program in Scarborough when I was growing up. So we were all like adept learners, and I was kind of like I was the dumbest kid in the Gifted program. You know, for the first long while, I thought there's a mistake. Like I don't know how I got in here, but I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut because. Um, but I came to realize I actually was pretty good at school, and I was a swift learner and a fairly intuitive thinker. Um, so I really did like school, and I continued in that program all the way to the end of high school. Had great relationships with friends and teachers, so I was very lucky.
Did you know what you wanted to be when you was at school?
From the moment I started playing guitar, all I wanted to be was a musician. Um, Much to the chagrin of many of my teachers who were encouraging me to pursue more mathematic or scientific avenues. Um, but every time I bombed a test, I thought, well, it doesn't matter because I'm going to be a songwriter and musician anyway. And it wasn't until the very end of high school I thought, I don't know how realistic this music career thing is. Started studying for the first time in my life, and I actually went towards doing a biology degree. Um, but in the end, I only did 1 year university, and then I got offered a record deal and dropped out. So,
Was the sort of music ever encouraged at school?
yeah, I went to a school with a very rich music program, and I was in the orchestra and the stage band and the choir. I was also involved in the drama program. I was in a lot of the productions. I was in the pep band. Like, if there was a band, I joined it. And plus, on top of all those school bands, I had a bunch of other bands. I played drums in a hip hop band. I sang and played guitar in the band I mentioned, where we played all the Rush songs. Um, I just Everything was about music for me.
Okay. Well, for track four, I'm going to ask you to tell me the first record you can remember buying.
Well, it goes back to Coward of the County. It was on the same record as The Gambler. The first record I ever bought with my own money was Kenny Rogers' The Gambler. It was $4.98 Canadian, and I bought it at an amazing record store near my childhood home called Zounds. Uh, it was huge. It was way bigger than any record store should have been. Like even at that time, when vinyl was huge and lots of people were buying music, this was a ludicrously large record store, and it was an indie record store in Toronto. I loved going there as a kid. I just loved perusing the aisles, and they had everything because it was so big. Um, Later got bought out by a national chain, and then as a teenager, I worked there. And it was like one of the best part-time jobs I ever had. We ended up the very first music video we ever filmed was only about 18 months after I stopped working there. So I went and saw my former manager and asked if we could film in the store, and she allowed me to do that. So yeah, but first record was Kenny Rogers, The Gambler.
Wonderful. So when you worked in this indie record store, did you become one of those guys? Did you become that high fidelity guy? Did you become that elitist guy that would like kind of, judge people if they bought something that weren't quite as cool as what you was into? Did you become that guy? It must happen so easily in indie stores.
I didn't because I I was learning so quickly, and I had only just uh, my horizons had only just expanded,
Yeah, yeah.
and the record store helped me do that. So, what I do remember doing is when people would come in, this will put the era together for you. People would come in to buy the California Raisins record,
Right.
right? Because I think it was maybe "Don't Worry, Be Happy" had been covered by the the Raisins in a commercial or something. So I would say to people, "Hey, like don't get this goofy soundtrack. Get the Bobby McFerrin record where the song comes from. The record's great and it's got all this other stuff on it. Don't buy this gimmicky commercial thing. Buy the original." Like I remember doing that instead of like making fun of the people behind their back and letting them buy the crappy record. I think I was so newly turned on by everything. Like I was just getting into jazz music. I was getting into all kinds of stuff, and I
Well,
think
you just found
I
out that
just
Peter
wanted every.
Gabriel was in Genesis.
I was trying to like share that enthusiasm for music. I wasn't jaded. I was like the opposite of jaded. I was like, I work in the magic shop, and I just want everybody to know about all the cool records in here.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, okay, and I'm going to move you forward to clubbing, and for track 5, can you tell me, please, the song that soundtracked your time clubbing, please?
Well, I need to put a pretty heavy caveat on this. Is I didn't do a lot of clubbing. Like I went from high school basically to touring in Barenaked Ladies. So the real soundtrack to clubbing for me is the first Barenaked Ladies record. But as a high schooler, I used to always go to this big club in Toronto that was called RPM. And I wasn't old enough to get in, but on Sunday nights, they had an all ages dance night. And the big DJ at the time was DJ Chris Shepard, who was DJ from a local radio station. And he spun everything that everybody wanted to hear at that time, which at the time it was LL Cool J and Beastie Boys and early KRS-One, and it was a lot of hip hop, early hip hop. And I will never forget one night. He probably did it because he was so sick of teenagers requesting it, and it was probably a middle finger to everyone on the dance floor. But he put on the entire side one of License to Ill, and we couldn't have been happier. Like, he probably just did it so we could go out and have a smoke, and knew that no one on the dance floor would care. But that's what I think of, and then I think of like Paul's Boutique when I was probably 18 when Paul's Boutique came out, and that was like a revelation in hip hop. Dust Brothers production and Paul Revere with the backwards drum sample. It was just like that was opening up new horizons for me.
Did you get the same thing as, I mean, I'm 48, and I think I was probably maybe 14, maybe 13, 14 when License to All come out. I was certainly at school, and I remember I've always sort of said this, and I've mentioned it several times on this podcast. Like that record was the closest thing to Never Mind the Bollocks. That was my punk.
Yeah.
It was so raucous that the British media hated them, didn't want them anywhere near the UK, and obviously to a young lad, when you're reading that, you want this band so much more. Like they become I mean, they arguably the coolest band that ever walked the planet. Full stop. The Beastie Boys. Like,
Yeah.
but that first record, which isn't, I think they've made much more, much better music, subsequently. But that record for me was the most raucous. I've never heard anything like it, and especially for hip hop in the UK, you would get, as you mentioned, some of them artists, you'd get a little bit of like Boogie Down Productions, you get a little bit of LL Cool J and DMC, but that was kind of it. Like it still felt really underground, and and naughty and like and scary, and much as I guess that the Pistols were 10 years previous to that. And for me, it was just the most exciting thing ever, the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with me too. It knocked me on my ass, and particularly as a young musician, really studying my instrument, really learning to play guitar, learning all these really complicated prog rock songs, then to hear "License to Ill" and go, "Oh, wait, none of that shit matters. It's all about attitude."
Yeah,
Like this record is exciting. That's what I want. You know, I want to engage and excite people. I don't want to dazzle them with time signatures and melodic wizardry. I just want the attitude.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm going to take you home for track 6, and I'm going to ask you, please, to tell me a favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Um, I think I gave you Donovan Woods for this one, right? Grew Apart. Uh, so Donovan's a good friend, and we actually co-wrote a couple songs that are going to be on my new record, Detour de Force. And he liked them so much, he recorded them for his record too. It's rare that you do that as songwriters. You sort of decide, okay, well, I'm going to record this one. But we talked to each other, and I said, actually, I think that's kind of cool. I'm such a fan of his approach, production wise, anyway, and the way we did the songs on our respective records is very different. So Donovan has this incredible knack for kind of dropping in mid conversation. He doesn't give you a lot of backstory, but he's so good at nailing the nuances of conversation that you really feel like you relate um, to the character in the story. And Grew Apart is a song about all those people who who can't articulate or can't even face the feeling they have, heartbreak, the loss of a relationship. And Grew Apart is about all those things you say to not have to admit you're hurting. And I just think he nailed it. He perfectly captured all the bullshit people say. Well, we're both better off now. It's like, really? Because I know you haven't been sleeping or eating, and maybe you should talk to somebody. And um, yeah, Grew Apart is about that uh, unnecessary pride that people take after a relationship to do anything to avoid saying, "Yeah, I think I messed that one up, and I'm really struggling." Uh, it's it's a perfect little song.
It's a beautiful song, and it was the first when I got sent the list over of your song choices. I'd not heard of him before,
Oh,
and it was an introduction, and I put together a playlist. I'll get onto that towards the end, but um, normally I sort of drop the tracks in and listen to them, and I spent a lot longer listening to lots of other stuff, and like ticked it, added it to playlists. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
he's my favorite modern songwriter. Like, and he's just a total dork. Like when you hang out and write songs with him, I just laugh all day. He's really funny, super dry, um, but he clearly is not afraid to tap into his much more pensive, emotional side. And he he's really spun some gold over the last 5 or 6 years. I would say most of my favorite songs from the last 5 years are Donovan Wood songs.
Well, you can get to spin some gold for our listeners for track 7, because this is your opportunity to introduce something they may not have heard. So for track 7, can you tell me a song that many may not know that you would like them to hear, please?
Well, I'm gonna be honest here and say that I'm not tuned in or hip enough to know what people may or may not know. But I will say that a record that really blew me away in the last year was Christian Lee Hudson's record Beginners. It's produced by Phoebe Bridgers. Um, Christian Lee Hudson is such an incredible guitar player. The first time I saw him play live, it was just over YouTube. I kind of discovered him throughout this whole pandemic, so I've never seen him in person. But um, the first time I watched him play, I, I thought, oh my God, he's doing all of that on guitar. I just assumed he was the strummy guy singing, and there was some guitar nerd playing all those incredibly intricate parts. But no, he's doing all of it. Um, and to top it off, he's an incredible writer. So the song I chose was Northsiders. Um, but you could take anything off of Beginners. The first, I think the first track is Atheist. Um, the guy is unbelievable. It really blew my mind. The first time I listened to Beginners all the way through, I went back and listened to it again immediately. Um, but yeah, Northsiders really captures a mood. It's a beautiful vocal delivery, and it's got some really clever little couplets in it. I don't want to screw it up, but there's a bit about uh, amateur psychologists, uh, serial monogamous. Da, 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 we went to different colleges, but it's got this hilarious way with words. Um, yeah, uh, I huge fan. I hopefully this will be a new discovery for people. I'm sure some people go, "Oh yeah, Christian Lee Hudson, dude, we know you're so old."
Well, we make it easy for people to go and get stuck in, because we put together a Spotify playlist of all the tracks that we've been speaking about today. So, with that in mind, before we wrap things up, Ed, I just want to ask you, as I mean, we're recording this on the 3rd of June, and it looks like the remainder of 2021 is going to be a much brighter prospect than the last, yeah, fingers crossed, absolutely, than what we've had, of the last year or so. With that in mind, what are you looking forward to personally, and what's going to be happening professionally?
Well, obviously, I think every band is looking forward to getting back out on tour and doing shows. Um, I'm looking forward to getting out and seeing friends again. I've been a touring musician for over 3 decades, so I have friends in the UK that I haven't seen in 2.5 years. So I'm looking forward to seeing people. I'm looking forward to playing for audiences. I'm looking forward to just not being afraid to be around other people. Uh, and now that I'm double vaccinated, I'm starting to feel that for the first time that it's not worrisome to go get groceries anymore. Um, so yeah, I'm just looking forward to a sense of normalcy and community again. It's been pretty isolating.
Wonderful, wonderful. If people want to keep up to speed with everything you're doing, Ed, where's the best place?
Google. Certainly barenakedladies.com, but follow us on Instagram, Barenaked Ladies Music, and or on Facebook, any of those places, and we try to keep everybody pretty up to date with everything we're doing. I think the first main thing we're going to do is get back to the UK. That'll be our first tour if all goes well, and if we don't see the Bath Mole Club variant taking the world by storm. The Mole Club washroom variant.
Well, I look forward to that, and I'll see you for a beer at the top of Salisbury Hill. Ed, thanks so much for your time, buddy. It's been absolutely delightful talking records with you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Stu. Thanks for having me, and I hope people enjoy my picks.
Have a lovely day, Ed.